The allure of classic Hollywood gave the impression of flawlessness. Celebrities were more than just gifted. It seemed as though they were divine beings, with intelligence and grace commensurate with their magnificent looks. A shocking reality lay concealed beneath the staged interviews and ideal lighting. A shocking lack of fundamental knowledge and common sense was displayed by some of the most renowned giants of cinema. The studio system that promoted these artists frequently ignored their intelligence in favor of their physical attractiveness. Something wrong with you? Personally, I feel that way. Studio heads didn't want artists with ideas. According to an ex-MGM casting director, the studio was looking for attractive people who could be directed. The opposite was true. Intelligence was seen as a burden. It made them more cynical and difficult to manage. Here we reveal 13 well-loved Hollywood icons, whose hidden intellectual shortcomings were on plain display today. These anecdotes show the tremendous chasm between the public's perception of celebrities and their actual financial situations, ranging from actors who forgot lines to stars who made disastrous judgments with their money. Loving you, lovely cherry one. The voice of a genius, the mentality of a child. That's Judy Garland. A great deal of emotional depth was shown by Judy Garland's magnificent performances. Those who were close to Garland at work said that she consistently confused co-workers with her astounding ignorance of simple concepts. A sound technician described Judy as having exceptional emotional intelligence on stage. However, her revelation of stunning knowledge gaps occurred after the cameras stopped shooting. She was dead serious when she once wanted to know if Australia was part of Europe. Garland's lack of formal education was a major factor in these shortcomings. After being signed to MGM at the tender age of 13, she was sent to studio lots for her elementary and secondary education, where the emphasis was more on meeting legal requirements than on giving a real education. An ex-employee of MGM came clean about the studio tutors being little more than paid babysitters. They weren't teachers. They were only there to comply with child labor restrictions. Even when she was a huge star, Judy hardly had the skills to compose a meaningful paragraph. This led to strange gaps in her knowledge that stayed with her all through her professional life. According to rumors, Garland questioned director Charles Walters about the exact date of Easter while they were filming Easter Parade. She asked why it wasn't in December like all the other holidays when told it was in spring, and she seemed really perplexed. In particular, Garland had poor mathematical skills. Despite her enormous wealth, she suffered from a lack of financial literacy, which led to ongoing issues with her finances. She had trouble with percentages, according to a company manager who remembered her. I did my best to explain that $10,000 is 10% of $100,000, but she still didn't get it. Most worrisome was Garland's habit of believing nearly anything told to her. A makeup artist recalled, "You could tell Judy that drinking grapefruit juice while standing on one foot would keep her young forever, and she'd believe it completely." Judy's naivete made her an easy target for doctors and handlers, who gave her whatever pills they said would enhance her performance, which greatly contributed to her addiction problems that eventually became her downfall. Please count it to Flynn Errol, an empty scabbard bedecks the swashbuckler. In timeless films such as Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood, Errol Flynn personified daring adventure. His protagonists were masters of disguise and delivered biting lines. But the truth shows one of the most shocking gaps between the actor and the job in Hollywood. A script supervisor revealed that Flynn showed shocking lack of knowledge in nearly every area. Even with a map, he couldn't find Europe. Despite Flynn's shaky academic credentials, he was born in Tasmania and lived in England before making it big in Hollywood. He never finished high school since he was expelled from so many. The thing that set Flynn apart was his total disinterest in learning, and his refusal to do anything about his shortcomings. Michael Curtis, who oversaw numerous of Flynn's successful films, gained notoriety for oversimplifying the actor's lines. A writer for Warner Brothers revealed that Curtis would cut out words with more than 2 syllables. This was due to Flynn's frequent inability to comprehend what he was saying, rather than a lack of pronunciation. Regular issues arose during filming due to this insufficient understanding. As a result of his inability to understand the words, Flynn would emphasize the erroneous ones when delivering lines. An audio engineer observed, "We'd do countless retakes because Errol would stress the instead of the actual important word. He wasn't reading for meaning, just saying words." Flynn's autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, was ghostwritten due to his inability to organize cohesive paragraphs. The ghostwriter went into detail on how they did it. After spending hours interviewing Flynn, I would organize his disorganized stories into a coherent story. He frequently asked himself, "Did I do that? I don't remember it that way." This was true even while talking about recent occurrences. The fact that he frequently portrayed a hero with lightning reflexes is the most ironic part. It was said that the actor who portrayed the smart characters once questioned a director as to whether New York was located in California. He wondered if New York included California after being corrected. You are exempt from acting if you are. No, I'm not an actor. The number 3, Tony Curtis, the dashing HMBBO of Hollywood. Tony Curtis's extraordinary career was built upon his magnetic screen presence and stunning good looks. Despite his polished performances, even the most tolerant Hollywood insiders were surprised by the actor's cerebral shortcomings, claiming Tony could memorize lines brilliantly, but often had no idea what they meant. A director from the 1960s said, in his flawless delivery of intricate conversation, he would then look at me and ask, "What did I just say?" As if he were a trained parrot. After Curtis left high school, he never continued his schooling. While filming The Vikings, Curtis allegedly questioned Kirk Douglas about whether the Vikings were really historical people, or if they were more like imaginary creatures like dragons. Kirk assumed Tony was joking, recalled a production assistant. Douglas spent his lunch breaks teaching Tony the basics of history after he saw Tony was being serious. What Tony didn't expect was that Vikings weren't fantastical creatures, just as shaky was Curtis's knowledge of geography. He kept getting the names of continents and countries mixed up while filming The Great Race. According to reports, director Blake Edwards had to explain to Curtis, who kept asking which roadways they would take, that they would have to cross an ocean to get from the United States to France. Curtis, in contrast to celebrities who masked their lack of education, would shock entire film crews by asking shockingly simple questions. When he was on a USO tour, he wanted to know if China included Japan. After hearing that it wasn't, he inquired further as to whether China was a part of Japan. His spending and saving habits revealed the same constraints. Curtis regularly lost millions of dollars worth of investment capital due to poor decision-making, informed by scant data. He once invested $50,000 in a scheme to import sand to Hawaii, because someone at a party told him Hawaii was running out of beach sand. He never even asked for a business plan. A business manager recalled this incident, yet Curtis nevertheless managed to have a successful career, despite these constraints. Despite his lack of academic proficiency, he was able to connect with audiences through his innate charisma and emotional intelligence. Yeah, we're available all day, every day. Exactly 4. Mansfield, Jane. A shocking revelation accompanied by grave misunderstandings. Many people think Jane Mansfield's supposed intellectual limitations were an act because of her reputation as the stereotypical dumb blonde. Far more complicated was the reality. Genuine educational successes and alarming deficits in basic understanding were both presented by Mansfield. Director confided in us that Jane had the most peculiar blend of knowledge and naivete that we had ever seen. If she wanted to boast about her 167 IQ and fluency in 5 languages, she could do so. Then she could query if the sun and moon were really just various phases of the same celestial body. Mansfield had a degree from Southern Methodist University and another from UCLA, which sets him apart from many of the others on our list. Her professed academic credentials appeared to be at odds with her real expertise, though, as her co-workers pointed out. A screenwriter recalled that Jane would casually bring up philosophical and literary references. Her memorization of impressive-sounding statements betrayed her lack of comprehension of their context, as you pointed out when you interacted with those references. She was dead serious once when she said that Betty Boop had attributed a Nietzsche remark to her. Especially precarious was Mansfield's hold on fundamental scientific principles. A makeup artist remembered, Jane once asked if drinking hydrogen peroxide would make her organs blonde. When I explained it would likely kill her, she seemed genuinely surprised and mentioned she'd drunk just a little bit the previous week. What complicated assessments of Mansfield's intelligence was her deliberate amplification of the dumb blonde persona. She recognized that playing into this stereotype generated attention, sometimes exaggerating her confusion for publicity. The problem was that Jane lost track of the line between her public persona and actual self, explained a publicist. She'd play up the confused blonde act for an interview, but then make the exact same knowledge errors in private, when there was no audience. Despite earning substantial sums, she repeatedly made disastrous financial decisions. Her business manager recalled she couldn't grasp the difference between gross and net income. She'd receive $50,000, immediately spend $75,000, and then be genuinely confused about why she was in debt. Beware, beware, beware of the big green dragon that sits on your doorstep. 5. Bela Lugosi, horror's icon, Hollywood's bewildered foreigner. Bela Lugosi created one of cinema's most iconic characters as Count Dracula. bringing an air of aristocratic menace to the role. His sophisticated performance suggested considerable intellect. The reality reveals a stark contrast between Lugosi's screen persona and his stunning limitations. Lugosi's difficulties went far beyond language barriers, explained a director from the 1940s. Even when concepts were translated into Hungarian, he struggled with basic reasoning. He couldn't follow simple plot developments unless they were explained like you might explain them to a child. Lugosi's limited English, which never substantially improved despite decades in America, contributed to perceptions of his challenges. He memorized many lines phonetically without comprehending their meaning. A Universal Studios sound technician recalled, Lugosi would deliver dialogue perfectly with that magnificent voice. But if asked to paraphrase or explain what his character was saying, he'd look completely lost. What distinguished Lugosi's case from mere language difficulties were his struggles with concepts that transcend language barriers. A producer noted, "We once spent 3 hours trying to explain why his character couldn't appear in scenes after the character had died. But I am Dracula. Dracula cannot die." He consistently conflated his real and mythical selves. Due to basic misconceptions, Lossi made disastrous financial decisions. An agent recalled, Bale signed away rights to his image for merchandising for a flat $1,000. When those products made millions, he couldn't understand why he wasn't receiving more money, despite having the concept of a one-time payment. Explained repeatedly, his personal beliefs reflected additional limitations. Lugosi maintained superstitions that went beyond cultural differences. A makeup artist remembered, Baya genuinely believed certain arrangements of objects could protect him from evil spirits. The arrangement of the furnishings in the room gave him the willies, and he once refused to film there. He regained his sense of security the second we shifted only one chair. The creator of one of the most cunning villains in cinema became disoriented in an industry that had outgrown him, unable to comprehend contracts, handle finances, or adjust to shifting audience preferences. He eventually worked with Ed Wood on what are widely regarded as some of the most terrible films ever made. "Stacy, please, declare your position. There is no way you can succeed. Who made you so unclean? Permit me a moment. My dance is meant to be this. Come on, what brought you here?" Number 6. William Raft, the criminal who was bewildered by the plot. George Raft became one of the most iconic mobster actors of all time, by lending Hollywood's gangster pictures an air of genuine tough guy believability. But Hollywood got to know Raft's intellectual limits as much as her persuasive performances. Director at Warner Brothers confided in George, saying that he couldn't grasp the scripts they sent him. I am not implying that he had difficulty comprehending intricate ideas. Basic story developments were completely lost on him. Just before we started filming, we had to act out each scenario as if we were describing it to someone who had never seen the script. Raft dropped out of school when he was a kid since he lived in Hell's Kitchen. Although this was common for performers of his time, what set Raft apart was his seeming inability to make up for his lack of formal education with his innate stupidity. His reading comprehension was very lacking. One of the screenwriters of George's Raft movie came clean about his functional illiteracy. On the page, he could make out his character's name and a handful of common terms, but that was it. His helpers read him the lines, and instead of reading them himself, he would just repeat them until he memorized them. There were major problems with production because of this restriction. According to a Warner Brothers producer, we tried explaining that his character was pretending to work for one side while actually working for another. After an hour of trying to explain it, George finally asked, "So, which side am I on again?" This demonstrated that Raft's intellectual limitations extended beyond literacy to basic reasoning. Another production assistant recalled that during filming of Background to Danger, 1943, Raft reportedly struggled to understand that his character was a double agent. We eventually simplified his role to avoid the confusion. Perhaps Raft's most famous intellectual misstep was his rejection of the lead role in The Maltese Falcon, which went to Humphrey Bogart and became a classic. Raft later claimed he turned down the part because he didn't want to make another gangster film. The truth, according to a Warner Brothers executive, George rejected it because he couldn't understand the plot. After 3 meetings trying to explain it to him, he just said, "This doesn't make any sense," and passed. Despite these limitations, Raft maintained a successful career by sticking to straightforward tough guy roles that played to his strengths. Unlike some actors who ventured beyond their intellectual capabilities, Raft seemed aware of his limitations and generally avoided roles requiring substantial dialogue or complex characterization. I'm not particularly proud that I have been married 7 times. To me, that's quite a number, 7. Lana Turner, the sweater girl with unraveled logic. Lana Turner rose from humble beginnings to become one of Hollywood's most glamorous stars. Her platinum blonde hair and hourglass figure, making her the quintessential sex symbol of the 1940s. Behind the carefully crafted image of sophistication, however, was a woman whose intellectual limitations repeatedly shocked those who worked with her. Lana couldn't grasp even basic concepts, revealed a frustrated director who worked with her on multiple films. We once spent an entire afternoon trying to explain to her why her character would be upset about her husband's infidelity. She kept asking, but why would she care what he does when she's not around? It wasn't that she was being progressive. She genuinely couldn't understand the concept of emotional betrayal. Turner's educational background was minimal. She was discovered at a soda fountain at age 16 and immediately thrust into the Hollywood system with no further formal education. MGM, recognizing both her appeal and her limitations, assigned her a full-time secretary whose actual job was to handle any task requiring reading, writing, or basic arithmetic. The studio knew Lana was nearly functionally illiterate, explained a former MGM employee. Her scripts had to be color-coded and simplified. Words with more than 2 syllables would be replaced with simpler alternatives. Even then, she'd often misunderstand basic plot points. Turner's geographic knowledge was particularly limited. During production of The Postman Always Rings Twice, she reportedly asked if Acapulco was in Italy. When informed it was in Mexico, she asked if she could drive there from the set in California for weekend trips, seemingly unaware of the distance or border crossing requirements. Perhaps most remarkable was Turner's inability to understand basic financial concepts, despite earning enormous sums throughout her career. Her business manager in the 1950s recalled, Lana signed a contract for $5,000 per week and asked if she would be paid daily or if she had to wait until Friday. She failed to understand that per week meant the whole amount when she inquired, "So I get $5,000 every day of the week?" in response to my explanation that it was a weekly rate. Despite being one of Hollywood's top-paid actresses, Turner's recurring money issues were partly caused by her financial naivete. She wasted money like there was no tomorrow, signed contracts without reading them, and invested disastrously based on informal advice. The combination of Turner's great screen presence and her openness to direction salvaged her career. Although filmmakers had to spend more time explaining her roles to Turner, she was popular with them because she followed directions precisely, unlike some stars who opposed supervision. While Lana may not comprehend her character's emotional state in a scene, she can certainly cry on cue while looking stunning, as pointed so by one cinematographer. That was sufficient in Hollywood. The names amic pentameter and the phonetic spelling of Monroe are just right. I see, she was named by you. Not exactly, but I accomplished it in my own way. Counting 8. That star who couldn't understand reality, Mickey Rooney. An incredible 9 decades were Mickey Rooney's working years, journeying from a youthful Hollywood star to an aging Hollywood veteran. He was the most popular actor in the United States for 3 years in a row in the late 1930s, thanks to his exuberant performances in musicals starring Judy Garland and the Andy Hardy series. Rooney had an incredible gift, but his mind was completely detached from reality and had trouble grasping even the most fundamental ideas. One of the filmmakers who collaborated with Mickey in the 50s gave the account of how Mickey lived in an endlessly made-up fantasy world. He was more than just narcissistic. It appeared like he really couldn't tell the difference between reality, as it actually was, and his own subjective interpretation of it. He had no idea what to do with unpopular information. He just ignored it, including fundamental information. This selective processing persisted. Rooney showed astonishing ignorance of filmmaking processes despite having worked his whole life in the entertainment industry. I tried to explain the concept of fixed expenses, that his mortgage payment was due monthly, regardless of whether he was working, recalled Mickey Rooney's accountant from the 1970s. As the production manager recalled, well into his 60s, Mickey still didn't understand that scenes were shot out of sequence. He'd become confused when we filmed the ending before the beginning, asking how the audience would understand the story if we told it backward. Rooney's financial reasoning was particularly deficient. Despite earning millions, he filed for bankruptcy multiple times due to his inability to comprehend basic economic principles. Truly, he couldn't understand it. But if I don't work that month, why would I have to pay? He would question, displaying a similarly weak grasp of geography and international affairs. Rumor has it that while on a USO tour in the 1940s, Rooney questioned the unity of the two countries, Japan and Germany, because we were at war with both. Rooney was irritated when a co-star tried to break down the main alliances of Wu, and claimed that there could be only one enemy, since everything else was too difficult. The indisputable talent that Rooney possessed made it difficult to evaluate his IQ. His comedic timing was spot on, and he could portray nuanced emotions brilliantly on television. Many of his co-workers were perplexed by the gap between his intellectual capacity and his performance abilities. The fact that Rooney failed to notice his own career downturn was most significant. According to a 1960s co-star, Mickey could brilliantly portray a character going through sophisticated emotional changes, then walk off set and ask which direction California was while standing in Los Angeles. He continued to talk of star vehicles being built for him, even in his latter years, when he was mostly cast in small character roles, and he would seem confused when these ideas never came to fruition. A casting director from the 1980s who worked with Mickey said that he would make up stories about imaginary meetings with studio chiefs and jobs that never existed. There was no deceit. It seemed as if these dreams were his reality. Although Rooney's intellectual struggles helped earn him the reputation as one of Hollywood's most challenging performers, his inherent enthusiasm and talent allowed him to maintain a remarkable career despite these restrictions. Chilled was Old Connor. There are 9. Holden, William. On-screen complex, but off-screen simple. In timeless films such as Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17, and Network, William Holden portrayed characters who possessed profound intellect and a sophisticated air of world weariness. Intelligent, perceptive, and emotionally complicated people were the norm for his protagonists. It was almost comical how different this was from Holden's true intelligence. Bill could deliver the most literate, complex dialogue brilliantly, said a director who cooperated with Holden on many projects, according to others who worked closely with him. After the cameras stopped rolling, though, he'd start asking questions that showed he still hadn't gotten the gist of his performance. He seemed to have an innate talent for seeming smart, even though he didn't actually have any. A lot of the people on our list had worse educations than Holden. Prior to his discovery, he attended Pasadena Junior College. Yet, his peers observed that his practical understanding appeared to be extremely restricted. Despite this, it seemed that analytical reasoning and making connections between ideas were his biggest intellectual hurdles. According to a scriptwriter who collaborated with Bill in the 1950s, the actor could recall certain facts, but he lacked the cognitive capacity to combine or interpret data. Despite its overt anti-war message, I discovered during writing negotiations for Bridge on the River Kay that he failed to grasp it. To him, it seemed like any other adventure narrative about breaking out of a prison camp. During productions, Holden's literal thinking caused problems. Holden and director Billy Wilder collaborated on numerous classics, and Wilder devised methods to aid Holden in understanding metaphors and subtexts. And Sunset Boulevard production assistant disclosed that Wilder would provide Bill with brief cartoon descriptions of incidents. He would sketch basic faces, either joyful or sad, to represent complicated emotional events, which Bill was unable to decipher from the script. Even the most fundamental of human drives remained a mystery due to this constraint. Apparently, Holden had trouble understanding his character's internal conflict about his affair with Faye Dunaway's ambitious TV executive during filming Network. It was director Sidney Lumet's way of putting it. She's bad, your wife is good, and you feel guilty. Reducing the complex moral situation to terms Holden could process. Holden's financial actions mirrored his cognitive limitations. He made the disastrous choice to renounce his U.S. citizenship to avoid taxes, not fully comprehending the full repercussions, while earning millions. According to his business manager, I spent hours explaining that while he might save on income tax, he would face massive estate tax issues and travel restrictions. He just couldn't grasp these long-term consequences, focusing solely on the immediate tax savings. The most intriguing aspect of Holden's case was the interaction between his alcohol abuse and intellectual limitations. His already impaired analytical abilities deteriorated even further as his drinking became worse. When the show Network aired, the crew noticed that Holden still needed a lot of instruction to grasp the most fundamental scene goals. Holden overcame these obstacles and enjoyed a fruitful career, thanks to his charisma and adaptability on television. The camera doesn't capture IQ, as pointed out by one cinematographer. Presence is captured. Even though he couldn't comprehend half of his character's dialogue, Bill has a plenty of charisma. No one has ever muttered anything to me. Lovely things that a girl enjoys hearing. 10. Lady Blondell. The witty blonde who struggled with even the most fundamental arithmetic Joan Blondell's 5-decade cinema career featured more than 100 pictures, each of which featured her brassy intelligence and street-smart charisma. Her protagonists were usually witty working ladies with smart minds, suggesting that there was more than meets the eye beneath their blonde locks. Hollywood insiders nevertheless said that Blondell's real intelligence was very different from her on-screen character. Working alongside Blondell during her 1930s glory, Joan could deliver rapid-fire lines that made her sound like the room's smartest person, according to a Warner Brothers director. However, she would disclose startling gaps in her understanding in between takes. It was for that President film that she once questioned my belief in the veracity of Abraham Lincoln. Blondell has a weak educational background. Her intellectual issues extended beyond just the gaps in her official education, as her colleagues pointed out when she dropped out of school to support her family in vaudeville. According to a screenplay supervisor who was involved with several Blondell films, Joan couldn't tell time on an analog clock. Even in her 40s, Joan would ask others to tell her the time instead than glancing at the wall clock. At last, someone inquired as to her rationale, and she confessed that she had never mastered the art of telling time. Particularly lacking were her mathematical skills. Blondell had trouble with even the most fundamental financial computations, despite making large sums during her prime years. The 1940s, Joan's boss recalled that she was unable to change money. She would patiently await notification that she was due a quarter, if an item cost 75 cents, but she paid $1. Her inability to deduct 75 from 100 was evident. Contract comprehension was also a numerical challenge. Since Blondell was unable to accurately tally the number of option periods, she allegedly signed a 7-year deal with Warner Brothers, thinking it was for 3 years. She was taken aback and adamant that something had to be wrong when the studio used their 4th-year option. Blondell overcame these obstacles by learning effective coping mechanisms. A co-star from the 1950s noted, "Joan had an amazing memory for dialogue. She never forgot a line. She used this same memory to develop workarounds for her knowledge gaps. She memorized what certain bill denominations looked like, memorized the positions on clock faces, and other practical shortcuts." Blondell's intellectual limitations became more apparent as she aged, and roles required more subtle performances. Directors who worked with her in her later years reported having to explain emotional motivations in increasingly simplistic terms. One recalled, "For a dramatic scene in a 1960s TV drama, I had to tell her, 'Your character is sad here because her friend died.' She asked, 'But why would that make someone sad?' It wasn't that she was being callous. She genuinely needed emotional reactions explained in the most basic terms. What saved Blondell's career was her natural charisma and the perfect alignment between her limitations and the roles she typically played. As one producer observed, Joan was perfectly cast as characters who were street smart rather than book smart. Her natural energy and charm came through, even when she didn't fully understand the scenes she was playing. Sometimes limitations can accidentally become assets in Hollywood. For this, it means the hotspot it does. If you can pin it on me, but I don't think you can. I think we can. Leon Victor Mature, the body beautiful with the brain basic. Victor Mature's powerful physique and rugged good looks made him the perfect star for biblical epics and action films of the 1940s and 50s. His imposing presence in classics like Samson and Delilah and the Robe established him as Hollywood's quintessential strongman. According to colleagues, Mature's intellectual capabilities matched the stereotype of the muscle-bound hero, severely limited and frequently comical. Victor was the genuine article, a good-looking man with virtually no understanding of anything beyond the immediate and concrete, recalled a director who worked with Mature on multiple films. During Samson and Delilah, he asked if the Bible was based on a true story, and he was completely serious. When someone explained that many people consider it to be true, he seemed genuinely surprised. Mature's educational background was modest, but not exceptionally limited. He attended Kentucky Military Institute and briefly studied acting. However, colleagues reported that he seemed incapable of retaining even basic information or following simple logical connections. Victor couldn't remember facts from one day to the next, explained a script supervisor who worked with him in the early 1950s. We'd explain a historical context for a scene, say basic information about ancient Rome for the Robe, and the next day he'd ask if Rome was a real place or made up for the movie. It wasn't a joke. He genuinely couldn't retain the information. Mature's challenges with abstract thinking were particularly evident. During the filming of film Noir Kiss of Death, he reportedly couldn't understand the concept of his character having mixed motives. The director finally gave up trying to explain psychological complexity and simply told him which emotions to display in each scene. His geographic knowledge was especially limited. A production coordinator on Safari remembered. Victor asked if Africa was a country or a city. When told it was a continent containing many countries, he seemed genuinely confused and asked, like California has Los Angeles. No explanation could help him understand the difference between a city, state, and continent. What made Matur's case particularly interesting was his self-awareness about his intellectual limitations. Unlike many stars who tried to hide their deficiencies, Mature occasionally made self-deprecating comments about his own mental capabilities. When a critic accused him of wooden acting in Samson and Delilah, Mature reportedly responded, "I'm not an actor and I've got 64 pictures to prove it." This self-awareness extended to his career choices. Mature generally avoided roles requiring complex dialogue or sophisticated characterization, sticking to parts that emphasized his physical presence. As one producer noted, Victor knew what he could and couldn't do. Because in his opinion, there is an excess of talking and insufficient fighting, he once declined a job. He understood his limitations better than most. Despite these intellectual challenges, Mature maintained a successful career by capitalizing on his impressive physical presence and working with directors who knew how to showcase his strengths while minimizing his weaknesses. As Cecil B. Deal reportedly said about casting him in Samson and Delilah, "I need a stupider-looking strongman, and Victor Mature is the stupidest-looking strongman I've ever seen. Well, when I'm good, I'm very good, but when I'm bad, I'm better." 12. Mae West, the sex symbol whose knowledge stopped at the bedroom door. Mae West built her legendary career on sexual innuendo, provocative one-liners, and a brazenly confident persona that was decades ahead of its time. Her scripts, which she often wrote herself, sparkled with double entendres and witty retorts that suggested considerable intelligence. Behind this carefully crafted image, however, was a woman whose actual knowledge was surprisingly limited and narrowly focused. Mae knew everything about one thing, sex appeal, and virtually nothing about anything else. Confided a director who worked with West in the 1940s, she could write brilliant dialogue about men and women, but ask her who the vice president was or where Europe was located, and she'd give you a blank stare, followed by a suggestive joke to change the subject. West's formal education ended early. She left school around age 12 to pursue vaudeville, but her intellectual limitations went beyond gaps in schooling. Colleagues reported that she seemed incapable of understanding concepts outside her specific areas of interest, particularly struggling with abstract ideas. Mae couldn't grasp basic scientific or historical concepts, recalled a writer who worked on one of West's later films. During a scene set at a dinner party where her character was supposed to make small talk about current events, she couldn't understand why her character would discuss anything beyond romantic conquests. She finally asked, "Why would anyone care about things that don't help you get a man?" Her geographic knowledge was particularly limited. During production of My Little Chickadee, West reportedly asked if Chicago was east or west of California, and when told it was east, she asked if that meant it was near London. When someone attempted to explain basic American geography, she quickly lost interest, saying, "Honey, as long as I know where the bedroom is, that's all the geography I need." What complicated assessments of West's intelligence was her genuine creativity within her narrow domain. She could craft clever sexual wordplay and understand the complex social dynamics of desire and attraction. This specific brilliance existed alongside stunning ignorance of basic knowledge in other areas. Mae was a paradox, explained a producer who worked on several West films. She could write an entire screenplay filled with clever dialogue navigating the censorship codes, but she couldn't tell you who won World War II or name 3 presidents. When someone mentioned the Great Depression, she thought they were talking about a psychological condition. Wes's financial understanding was similarly limited to practical matters directly affecting her. She negotiated surprisingly good contracts for herself, but couldn't grasp broader economic concepts. Her business manager recalled, "Mae understood. I get this much money, but couldn't comprehend inflation, investments, or financial planning. She kept thousands in cash hidden in her apartment because she didn't trust or understand banks." Despite these limitations, West maintained a successful career by staying strictly within her intellectual comfort zone. She created a persona where suggestive humor could stand in for real facts, scripted parts that played to her skills, and shied away from situations that required knowledge beyond her limited competence. Someone pointed out that Mae didn't have to be familiar with global geography. For a few hours at a time, she captivated audiences by creating a world in which she was the protagonist. In other words, it's just like that. 13. Bravo, Montgomery Cliff, you technique actor. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and press the bell icon. Thanks for watching.